When I think you made the last. So we'll start out. There's 3 pieces that are ours. The rest belong to the district. So the first piece that's ours is our audit report. So you're hearing myself,
You don't have to get used to it.
which is fine.
Could we
So-
just turn off that projector, you think? Yes, we don't, we've got these screens, so I don't think we do it. Just these.
So page 9 is the first one. And this is the independent auditor's report of the numbers in your financial statements. So we believe that the numbers are fairly presented in all material respects, which is a pass. And then just one thing to point out on this one, change in accounting principle, we have just an extra paragraph letting you know that there were some changes due to the adoption of GASB statement number 96, which is related to those. It's not leases, that is wrong. Which is the subscription-based information technology arrangements or your IT agreements that are multi-year agreements for software, cloud storage, student software, Blackboard. So that change went into effect this year. So that is our report number 1. The second report that we have is kind of near the back. That is related to your internal controls over financial reporting. And this is, is everything functioning correctly to make sure that all of the numbers are right and that, sorry, page 61. And we do have 2 findings that came to our attention as we looked at internal controls. And there's actually a lot of pieces and parts to the finding. I tried to kind of condense it into just 2 because there's a lot of things that we ended up finding this year, some of them old, some of them new. And so we wanted to include both of those. And so the 2 sheets that are sticking out, these are the ones for some reason they didn't print correctly. So these are the issues. And so if you start on, and it also printed page numbers weird, but it starts on page 5. So there's the audit findings in relation to the financial statements or the ones that belong with this letter. And there's 2 of them, which is just the financial statement preparation. And then we've got account reconciliations that belong with this section. And these are still in draft form. I'm still working on the wording. But the big thing to note is some of this stuff really does stem from the past, from the old financial director and the way that things were being done or reconciliations not done, requests to the federal government and state for reimbursement wasn't being done timely. And so it caused quite a few little problems that fluctuated throughout, which is why we were still having adjustments at 1:30 in the morning the night before the presentation, because there was just a lot of little things. But some of it is also just the fact that without the previous financial director, the people that were left in charge were kind of thrown into the fire. There's a lot of things that they had to face that really was above the level that they were prepared for. Not that they're not capable of doing those. I want to make that very clear. They are capable of doing the job, but the training and the time and the knowledge that they needed to be able to do that in the middle of an audit was significant, and they didn't have that. And so that made the whole process a little more difficult as well. It's trying to answer questions when you weren't watching that the whole year and when you didn't really understand where that information was coming from anyway. That's a big ask, and it was a big strain for your people to be put in that position right at the end of the year. So these findings are related to both things that we actually found and just the required controls and the required training and the required everything. And I tried to just kind of group that all into 2 things because I really think it was just the combination of issues that was all coming to play that brought those 2 things to light. So you can read through what we've got here, but like I said, that wording is draft. I'm still working with a couple of partners to make sure that it's phrased correctly, because I know that this won't have me explaining to everybody who reads this what that actually means. So I want to make sure that it's very clear in the written wording. What that means.
Question.
Yes.
So these issues that you uncovered, do you think they're unique to just the last year, or do you think that they happened previously as well, but just for lockdown?
Some of the issues do stem to kind of in the past, and we'll get there with the next letter as well. And so when we were looking at account reconciliations, which is that second finding, there were balances. The easiest one to think about is like $370, I think, $1,000 balance that had been sitting there since 2021. We found it at 2022 that it should be reversed, but it wasn't until like the end of the audit process. And so Angela asked us not to, and we'd get it in 2023. We agreed with that, but in 2023, it still hadn't been fixed. And so we did fix it in 2023, but it's really the 2021 issue. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that belonged in the past. We were looking at AR reconciliations, especially for your federal funds. Those requests not being made timely actually caused a couple of layers of expenditures that were never requested for, that then Linnell and Jess had to go back and talk to the state and say, hey, these should have been requested back in the past. We requested that funding for other expenditures, so we need to go back and kind of shuffle expenditures so that we can get the money in the right buckets, so that we can take advantage of as much of the funding as possible. So yeah, there's some of that and some of the stuff.
So Teresa, just as I'm reading through these first two, so the first one, which is in regards, it looks to me pretty much like just like you said, that not understanding some of the things that were going on, just due to the timing of the change. So really that recommendation there is just training so that the staff is fully on board with the GAP and GASB standards.
Yep.
The second one, there's some procedural things that need to be updated. Is that correct?
Yeah, and again, it's some of this is also going along with the training. So
Okay.
You've got employees who have been delegated certain aspects of job requirements, and so they're just unaware of other things that happen in the background or that other people are in charge of. So making sure that they're cognizant of all of the pieces that need to be done and not just the ones that they're familiar with.
Cross training.
Yes, yeah. We did find, like I said, that 370 is a stale balance that had just been sitting there. There's lots of those, and we only focus on material things and things that are significant. That's the purpose of the audit. So we are not going to go in every single balance and check every single balance. But if we see something that's been sitting there for a couple of years, we might ask the question, what is that? Why is it still there? And that's what we did. Looked at a couple of things this year and just found that reconciliation process is just not happening as much as we'd like to see it happen, as much as it should happen on a regular basis. So
How often do you, like, I just don't know from a public perspective, I know it happens in my business, how often is it reconciled?
monthly.
But same for.
Yep.
Okay.
And the hardest part is you're looking at, I can't remember exactly how many account codes you guys have, but it's somewhere in the realm of like 5,000. I mean, it's like in thousands. So when we say reconciling regularly, it's a daunting task. It's a big task. And I understand that that's what we're asking to be done. But just like in a business, if you do that regularly, it becomes a very manageable, very easy process because you're very familiar with what's going on. So it will be the same once we get through that kind of hard labor of digging through everything that's in there right now.
And these aren't small accounts.
Nope.
Accounts receivable, accounts payable, those, we're not talking about like the 10,000-400 account. We're talking about
Well, I mean,
three.
well, your
So,
accounts payable is made up of what, like 20 something smaller accounts. And so, yeah, it's a process.
If it's not doing it 3, it's not getting done
10,000.
anywhere, because that's where I hear about it. And I think that's where some of the biggest frustration appears over the years, especially this year, is just these accounts and how money fluctuates every time they look. It's a different number.
Well, and the other thing to point out, and this goes along with the next set of findings, which is your federal awards. And so on your federal awards, the finding is describing the preparation of the CFOR schedule of expenditures of federal awards. But the finding really is related to those AR balances and the reconciliation. A lot of your accounts were overspent, like not by a little. We've got one in here, you'll be able to see it. It's got a negative $300,000 balance. Because they're just overspending and not being caught. And so going along with that account reconciliation is your budget should be your driver as a government unit. That should be your driver for all spending. And so if your budget is not driving your spending, what else is? What are you watching? What are you doing? What are you reconciling on a regular basis? So that's
And you might remember that this was part of Linnell's report back in September, August at the work session where she went through some of that.
First time you've heard this, but
Yeah.
and knowing that you've only been with us for a few months, Carlos,
And Linnell less.
my
And Chris-
question is, what kind of controls are in place today to prevent a $300,000 overture?
I think we
And then-
want,
Sorry, and just to go along with that, you said there was more than one account that was $300,000 over.
only one is that big. That was the biggest, but there's quite a few that were overspent. We had to make a lot of adjustments to get expenditures out of funds where there wasn't enough funding to cover it and move them to general fund. Which is the other damaging part, right? Because these expenses are either not budgeted in your general fund or they're expenses that are just kind of blindsiding your general fund. Because you thought they were covered elsewhere, but when it comes down to it, they're not. So
I don't understand that concept when I have a budget of 100,000.
And then I would want to report on everybody that overspent.
Yeah,
Like,
I would like
what
to know too, and the reasons behind
the
it.
reasons behind the overspend.
so you might recall when Linnell came, we talked about the general fund balance was lower than what we had understood previously. And part of that was we were having to make up for these gaps that Teresa found or what we found in the audit. So it's also why we've had difficulty this year. There's a couple of reasons. One is we have principals who have not all turned in how they want the money allocated. So then the budgets didn't get done. Linnell has been working on that, even though she sent emails and all that. She's reached out to them. We've met with the ADs. We're trying to address that. But in the midst of all that, this is what Linnell's been trying to figure out and tackle. This is what she inherited. The federal program monthly draws, and you can do the draws really whenever, but they should be occurring monthly because we pay for them and then you draw to reimburse. That was not happening. We were going months and months without a draw.
and the state
I-
actually says every month.
That's the best practice. And that is, well, the federal money,
Requirement?
It's not a
no,
requirement.
no, it's just the best practice. It's the best practice. So when there's been a lot of pushback on Linnell, and I'm gonna be transparent about that, when there's been a lot of pushback on our business manager, just wrapping our arms around what last year was, and then the budget that was proposed and approved by the board with the understanding that we had at the time, it also has problems, which Linnell is trying to go back and fix. The consequence of that is it's created a lot of difficulties in our desire, and we've assured schools this, we want to be customer service oriented, but if we don't know where we're standing and fix things first, it's hard to move forward. So it's been difficult. I mean, you're right. People were thrown in with very little training, and the business manager wasn't the only person that was true of in the reorganization. So the kindness and the consideration, and even when we met with athletic directors and went through every single question they had, and the news was not always good, and that news that wasn't always good, again, we have to remember, when that started officially, more towards the end of August, and I'm grateful for the work she's done. It wasn't that she was handed this ruby and asked to continue with it. I mean, we've got coal and we're trying to turn it into a diamond here because that's what we want. But there's a lot of hard work and a lot of holes. So again, best practices we would pull every month. Our controls being put in place. I can tell you Linnell and Jess are working tirelessly. Linnell's here at 6 a.m. I've been here at 8 at 9 at night. Linnell's still here. given what we had, we have been working really hard to do our best to figure out where we were, where we are, and what we can do with what we have.
I think it's important to note that I'm not criticizing Lunel or any of the work
Not either.
that's being done. I just.
Just want it fixed and move forward.
Yeah.
But I would still
Yes.
like an answer to Jeremy's question, because the answer to his question isn't Vanilla. The answer to his question is who overspent that account by $300,000, or who overspent the other account by.
That's the question, did they even know? I mean, that truly based on some of the feedback
They
we.
can explain it.
Yes, but I think rather they get the feedback, we know that, I think people.
I think rather than getting into who at this particular time, that focusing on where we're at and moving forward is more important. And then we can talk about some of those who's as we down the road. And I'm not trying to deflect, but I also don't want to get us into a litigious situation.
I think accountability, though, is also really important.
I agree.
It's one of the things that we hear the most, probably accountability and transparency are the two things we hear the most from our patrons. And I don't want to look like we're hiding from those things by
So
just saying.
I have a couple of questions. Number one, if we say names at this moment.
We can't say,
Yes.
I don't.
Okay,
it would be an executive session discussion.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
No, I'm not asking for names right now. No, I don't expect people to say. But what I'm saying is I would like us to find that out, understand why it was done and make sure it doesn't.
So that's why we had Linnell come to the work session August, thank you. At the end of August is why we have said she will come regularly. But the reports are not always, and some of that might come a little slower than we want. I mean, some of those questions we could answer now. But you will consistently get reports from Linnell at the work session. You may have questions that we need to continue to dig into. We want to be transparent. It's why it's a shift from past practice. I'm not saying you didn't get reports, but we are trying to be very transparent. We're trying to tell you that the general fund has changed.
So it's worse than I expected after Mel's coming in September. And it's just worse.
Well,
It's more like seeing this written down by the auditor is worse than I expected. And what I want to know is how are the reports we're going to be getting going to be different than the reports we were getting, and what internal controls are changing so that this won't happen, because I certainly was not expecting to ever get anything like this from what I was told was already in place. So how do we know that I feel like I was lied to? And how do we know that I won't be lied to again? And I don't want to feel like you or Linnell, I'm not attacking you personally, but I just want to know, how is this not going to happen again?
so, and I'll let you help with the control question because you're gonna know that at a level deeper than I can go. In August, when we met, we were looking back at last year's budget. And after that work, we knew, and Linnell reported, we had a $3 million difference in what we had understood the general fund balance was. And after Linnell did all of this work of trying to go back and rectify things that were overspent, we were down about $3 million. She reported that to you at the August work session. So now what you're seeing is an auditor confirming what Linnell reported. So I hope that that would help build trust. Linnell can speak to the controls, but it's why I would like her to consistently report to you so that you'll know those things. One is that the draws were not made. So that was a problem. We understand from what people reported to us that they felt that at the building level. And Linnell has been working to rectify that. And we're trying to make sure principals are using our accounting software. There seems to be a broken front on that, where they could or could not track their balances. Some of them started their own spreadsheets because of that. So we are just being a lot more clear with them, and things are not changing. Everything's stable. We've told them, except for your expenditures, we will not be adding to your budget, nor will we be taking away. I'm sorry this is a surprise because it matches what we know reported in August and August.
You just said that we have problems with our front end system. Can you explain that?
Did you just say that it was a sentence that had front in it? I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it says.
Just grade, like at the school level?
Yeah,
Is
you're,
that what you mean by
yeah,
that?
yeah. you
Well,
said-
what our principals reported when I met with them, way even before July 1st, before I was hired, was one of their frustrations was that, and you mentioned it, Teresa, I think you did, that their budgets were, their amounts always seemed to be changing, that it wasn't stable. One day they'd look at their building budget and they had X amount of dollars. The next day that could have gone up or down, and they would have expended nothing. And they couldn't figure out why it was fluctuating like that. My understanding is that things were being transferred and moved around between accounts frequently. And
From the district office.
yes,
Okay.
and so as those accounts, and I'm not saying, I'm not making an evaluation of that practice. I'm reporting what I was told and has been confirmed.
So
That, so money was moved between accounts a lot. And so then they would see fluctuations and they found that to be challenging to manage their budget. So what we made the commitment to them was that will no longer happen. But we have to wrap our arms around it. And Linnell's first challenge was the audit and figuring out where we were last year. Then going through the proposed budget to make sure what was proposed wasn't a repeat of this. So that's what Linnell has been working through, moving through since August. There's still been some cleanup from last year, but she's been working through to make sure the proposed budget is workable. And so that's why some things have been slower and more methodical, but it is why we have a $3 million difference in the fund balance that Linnell and I understood was there when we started and where we're at now.
could we have Linnell just speak just a little bit about the controls?
Please.
And I think the thing that interests me the most is just making sure that once budgets are set, then they don't change, and if they are changed, who authorizes the change and how it's authorized?
Yeah, I would be happy to speak to the controls, to the best of my knowledge at this point, and I say that. So I'm still trying to figure that out. As the focus has been mainly in the books as opposed to that. But I will be the one that will be responsible for making the draws. I started doing the draws in July when I came, and then all of this stuff was discovered. And so I'll be honest with you, I haven't done them since July because we were having to go back and fix, and what was overspent, we'd have to put that to the general fund. So those draws haven't happened. Once this is finalized, draws will happen every month without fail.
So you're talking February.
Federal draws,
Yeah.
So when will that start? How long is it going to take to get this fixed?
Well,
3 months so far.
yeah, well,
Well, are we talking
There was-
5, 6, 7?
no.
We're waiting for
Like
the
the-
audit to be final.
Yeah, that would be finalized. This has to go, this is required to be sent to the state by November 15th. And I think will probably be finalized prior, I would think the next week, yeah. So I can start making all of those draws. Let's see, next week is the 30th, 31st. November 1st. I will start making the draws from July. I can do all of the July, August, September, October draws. And then on November 1st.
And then it'll
And
be
then
like-
then December 1st, and yeah, I'll be making those draws. There's a lot of work to it. I can't always get them done in one day, depending on how many people I have coming in and out of my door. But it's a couple of days to get the draws done. But yeah, so you have my commitment that will happen every month. And as far as the other controls, like, I know, I'm not sure what exact controls that you're talking about. Are you talking about like the payroll controls? Because I have no
So,
I have no,
so the control that interests me the most, and it sounds like what caused the problem was that, that somebody on the back end could fund a principal's budget and then just randomly willy-nilly take that budget and then move it and then randomly move it back in. So that's what it sounds like we need controls on. And if you don't have an answer, I mean, you
Yeah,
don't research and get back to us.
right, because the people who have control to do that would be me and the comptroller, which we need to have those controls because I'm the one that sets the budget, right? And well, you set the budget, but I have to load it.
Right.
So I have to be able to have access to do that. And I reported at the last board meeting that, oh, I know they're empty words when I say it here, but if any principal ever has an issue of, wait a minute, I have this amount in my budget and now it's gone. Please come and let's get to the bottom of that because there are only two people who I believe, I'm not sure about this, but I believe there are only two people who have access to do that. And that would be myself and the comptroller.
Can you just verify and just get back to us on that, just let us know? And let's just,
That seems,
let's
And
just,
I think of why, like,
Yeah.
why would we do that? Why wouldn't we do that?
there's so
Where-
many.
I-
I would be shocked if there's only two people that have that control.
There is one reason that it has been done in the past. Reason that it was done in the past is because there was some district level spending that was for the principals in behalf of principals. They called up and said, hey, we order this for you, or things like that. And so the budget was removed from the principal budget because it was spent at the district level. If that makes sense. So things like that.
and
But
it
again,
seems like the principal would know that.
Well, I will tell you that if I get a request like that over the phone, I'm gonna back it up with an email. And I'm gonna have the email as backup in that journal entry.
Yeah.
Our system has the capability of, and we do it already. The backup for any journal entry is entered into the software system. And so anytime if there's ever a change requested by a principal, that request is going to be followed up with an email and that email will be attached.
Another thing Linnell has done, because I saw her do this with the athletic directors. Was that this week? Yes, it was
Yeah.
this week. Sit and go code by code by code and help them understand their entire budget and why it looks the way it does. Or why last year, because we were looking at last year's and figuring out where the glitches were and where the problems were. And the other thing is we've seen people start to come to Linnell about her budget. And I think that has not been the practice becoming the business manager. It's gone other places. So that's where we're trying to build that trust and also build their knowledge and capacity too.
Yeah, and I want to be very, very clear that, like, I'm not attacking or anything. I just want to be clear that if it happened in the past, and we for sure, and like, we don't completely understand the controls, let's make sure we completely understand the controls and make sure that.
Agreed.
Just to the comment about August, my understanding from that discussion is that we were $3 million overstated. That's what I took away from that, not $3 million missing. Is what I thought from that. I think it's the same thing.
Well, actually, I think Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's a difference between money that's missing and an overspent budget. Because money that's missing means that.
Just that.
Yeah, that.
Kind of hard to define that much further.
Money that's overspent is like I get out my credit card and now I've got to use my savings to pay it off. And to me, those are different
Yeah, they are
things. So I want to be sure that it was overspent. And so we had to dip into our saving to get everything back on solid ground and the right footing. And that is why, well, it's one of the reasons, but not the only, but one of the reasons Linnell did not go to the principal's retreat in Island Park. because she was back here trying to work through the audit, but also work through a lot of these things. It just takes a lot of time when you have thousands of accounts to go through every single one and try to help people understand them and also figure out where we are. So controls will be tackled. And we will be changing the way that we operate. This is a high priority for me, and it's a high priority for Linnell. We've had a lot of discussions about that, but this is a big task. And we have a lot that we're trying to write, RIGHT, in our work. And we are, and we will.
Sounds like there's a lot of WRITE that needs to take place. Because you don't have a manual of controls that are, if I want to move this to this budget, and what's the process to do it? It sounds like there's a lot of writing and documentation that needs to
Formalized
take place.
procedures.
Yes,
Or we need to follow them. Maybe they were there.
Review them,
Yeah.
follow them.
That's what I said, we have them.
so you need to know if we have-
Well,
No,
I said
learning.
I haven't had time to delve into that part because I've been delving into all of this. So as far as the procedures,
For me, it's almost worse if they do exist, because that means that they weren't. Then I go back to kind of Jeremy's point of like, then I would like to know who spent $300,000.
and my guess would be that it was because people did not have budgets. That would be my guess.
That's true. Like we met with somebody in the last bit who wasn't aware that they had overspent because they didn't have their budget and it wasn't as accessible. So we went through, helped them, set them up. It's in software. They will know. And Linnell's done a lot of that.
Said that I didn't have a budget. I was told to just spend what I needed and we would true it all up in the end. I had that conversation with another employee, and the director this week.
So we're working on those controls. We're working on building the capacity. And it's going to take time. I think, Linnell, what I'm interpreting from what you're saying is we've been working so hard on this. It's not that the controls are being ignored, but we've got to know where we're at so that we can make sure we're applying the correct ones. So
And then, so I don't want to dive into this further, but when we say that a director, like a high level director came and said,
Linnell, I think we need to be careful about what we're going on.
About potentially needing it to be an executive
session.
session.
If you do that, you
We can do it.
No,
Can't
no,
say
but
this.
we can put it on. for
Okay,
2
so
weeks
let me
later.
go back. let me take a step back. If somebody that is serving at the director level doesn't know the policy and procedure on how to use budgets,
I shouldn't have said director. It was not a director.
I think there have been.
So we may need some additional training on procedures and policies across the district in regards to the financial stuff, because, yeah. So, okay,
So I do have another question. How do the principals know that they can come to you if you weren't able to be at the principals retreat, which I fully understand? And I don't see all the principals in this room. How do they know that they can come to you? How are they finding this out?
We've had our principals meeting. We have it monthly, is it monthly?
Okay.
And that, I believe that was communicated today. If it hasn't been, it will be. It will.
And Linnell, remember, we sat down and said, here are X number. And I remember the number, but I'm not gonna say, of principals who did not turn in an allocation last spring and still haven't. And when I came up with a plan that and she'd emailed and done all that, so I said, would you please call each of them, set up an appointment and go through this with them? And she has been working to do that. That's why we also met with the athletic directors. We made that commitment to call weeks ago. So she's been working on those things too.
so
can I suggest one thing here too, is it ties back to this one with kind of some of the cross training that Teresa brought up. It's great.
Page are you on?
It was like on 7, it just the general, like, people knowing how different things work, because I can see, Linnell, like you are swamped, you are overwhelmed, and it's great to have an open door policy. But when you're so busy that you're trying to keep up, if there's no one else that can do it but you, and you don't have time to do it, and it's no fault of your own, I do not want you to think that. We've got to find a way that you have the ability to redirect some of these people. Because if you've got 20 principals 4 times a week going, what about this? What about that? You know, and then you've got the coaches and you've got this, you know, we've got to find a way that there's an open door policy. People can get the information, they know how things work. But I don't know that that can all fall back on you either. So back to the cross street.
I appreciate that. And I will say, Jess Sortwood has been phenomenal. Like she has been. She has tackled most of what is needed to be done with the audit. Where a lot of that probably should have fallen on me. But given what I was doing, she jumped in and took that and did a fantastic job, especially with things that she hadn't done before. But she was willing to jump in and tackle it and take it on. And we would collaborate and we would, you know, I'd run down to her office, she'd come up to mine and we would work together on some things. But so I think there is some of that. Getting this off her plate is going to be huge. It really will.
And Hillary, I agree with you, but to Paul's point where we recognize, well, actually, we are trying to build trust in this administration. And part of that comes from the meeting, like a meeting we had this week at answering the hard questions. And it was both Linnell and I going through budgets, the time spent there to build trust and show we be responsive. Although it puts more on our plates than we might typically not do, I think helps us move forward in the right direction. So for right now, it's an investment we're willing to make. I don't think it's something we will continue to need to do in the future.
And then maybe we delegate other stuff, because I'm good, I'm not telling you how to do the balance.
Oh,
It's
no,
just
no.
there's the balance there.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
like, whatever.
And I do.
You guys do that.
In the future, looking at how it can be done in the future, once you build that trust.
I'd like to ask one more question. I was gonna hold it for the finance report, but we're talking about it right now. So I'll just raise it now. I think like one of the concerns that was raised to me, but it's coming up here because you're saying this person didn't have a budget. Talking to, so you did training and because they didn't realize that they were over budget because they didn't have a budget. You know, in your 2 weeks ago, you stated everybody has their budgets. That was something that was claimed here. And now we're just saying to people, this person overspent because they didn't have their budget. And my phone started ringing that night and it gained momentum as people started calling each other that night and the next day saying, do you have your budget? I don't have my budget. Do you have your budget? They said everyone has their budget. I don't have my budget. No, I don't have my budget either. You know, we say everyone has their budget. And I heard that Wednesday night and for the bulk of Thursday. And so I get that athletic directors are, because you said that before in your letter and you said it tonight that they haven't done their allocations or whatever. I accept that, but if that's the case, don't announce in board meeting that everybody has their budgets.
Well, let me explain and then you jump in. Sure. So everybody who had turned in their allocation had a budget. Linnell had emailed them and asked, and if they hadn't responded, you know, what do we do? So with the ADs, it wasn't that they turned in their budget. It was never requested, but we didn't know that. What they explained to us was that they typically had a meeting in the spring and they were just told, don't worry about it. And we thought that they just hadn't turned in their allocation. So when we met, so everybody who turned in their allocation had a budget. We have money set aside for every school. You just need to know, do you want X in consumables, X in capital, X in, that's all we were waiting for. And it's not because they hadn't received emails, they just haven't responded. So that's when I said to Linnell, reach out, set up meetings. So I personally don't see it as you were lied to. I see it as everyone who had done what they were supposed to had a building budget. So everyone had a budget and money's been set aside. And maybe that's an interpretation, but I guess I would worry that Linnell is getting painted as having lied.
Not
really
just
she's-
misled, but I understand where you're coming from. I'm just giving a recommendation that when we say every person has their budget, everyone has their budget, person was what I added, just last board meeting, we said, it was stated, everyone has their budget. And it wasn't fully accurate. Now, the reason behind it, I now understand. But at the board meeting, when it said everyone has their budget, and people are like, I don't have my budget. It causes confusion and it does cause mistrust because it was stated in a public meeting, everyone has their budget, when in fact they didn't.
And I think that's fair. I don't think that was the intent, but I think.
Yeah, I
it's
don't
fair.
think it was the intent either, but it was the result.
And I think that's fair.
Well, thank you.
So I think we just need to be careful in how we state things. It's similar with maintenance, but that's not on the agenda. So we'll talk about that in 2 weeks.
So before we end, can I
was gonna let Teresa out. I was like, trying to find back to Teresa.
Are you like sending text, move dinner back to 7 o'clock?
I never even took out anyways.
before Linnell sits down, I hope that privately sometime, if you have a chance, that you would thank Linnell for the work she's done. I mean, she was given a difficult task. We're not through it. We've got a challenging year ahead of us, but we will have the patrols not just written down, but followed, and not just followed, but understood. And when you have 1,200 employees, that's going to take some time. And Linnell and I are not the only ones that will do that work. And we'll work efficiently with some trainings and principals meetings. But I also just want to acknowledge that she's put in more time than anyone could ever imagine in a project that is more arduous than anyone. And either one of us probably thought when we were starting down that path, and there's been no intent to mislead. Really, what we're trying to do is take what we were given and use it wisely and well, but make sure we know where we're at so that we can do that work. I'm sorry to talk that long, but this is something Linnell and I have been working a lot on. And Linnell more than I by far.
Thank you, Linnell.
Right, so one thing to just kind of piggyback off of that is I want to make very clear that in none of our testing did we find anything that didn't belong in your financial statements. All of the expenditures, including the ones that were overspent, were appropriate for the fund that they were put into. There was, like for example, Medicaid had, I think, $2.1 million of expenditures over and above the reimbursements received, and that had to be moved to your general fund. So that's a big part of that $300 million. But those Medicaid expenditures were appropriate expenditures. So that's an important distinction, I believe, to make.
With Medicaid, aren't we forced to spend that if it comes to us?
And that's the other point that I wanted to make, is a lot of these expenditures, especially in the ones that had to be moved, they aren't necessarily avoidable expenditures. It's that the fund where they were put kind of made them, hidden is the wrong word, but they weren't obvious and they weren't necessarily part of your initial budget and expectations. But these are things that you needed for your kids. IDEA, Title IV, Medicaid. These are programs that your federal funded programs aren't usually ones where you're just throwing money out the window. These are because kids are requiring it because you have kids with needs. So that was the other piece I wanted to point out. Is when you did have overages, it wasn't just because I bought 50 extra Chromebooks that sit on the shelf. It was because I had a kid with service needs and I had to get a speech therapist in, or whatever those might have been. So anyway,
More knowing that before we do the audit, then so we know 6 months into the year versus 12 months into the year is
Exactly.
where we want to get.
and doing those reimbursements on a more timely basis definitely paints that
Makes it
picture of it
easier to
Yeah,
tie it together.
much quicker, so you can see, oh gosh, we have a lot more kids with needs. Let's change the budget. Let's figure out what we're doing. Yeah. Okay, so just really quick, because I know that you're probably done with me, so. We did have the one change that I wanted to point out. So going back to page 12 of your financial statements, net position. Last year, I think I spent quite a bit of time explaining the lease requirements and how You have to do the special fund calculations for the rest of the life of the lease and then stick it on your balance sheet. And then this year they put that same requirement on those IT contracts. And so you see probably a quarter of the way down, you see right of use asset net, which is Espetus. Those are those subscription information technology agreements. So you have 600 or 765,000 in asset related to that, and then your liabilities. You see the contracts payable, Espetus, short term and long term, and that is significantly less because you have a lot of prepayments. So using the COVID funds and using some of the other funds that you had, you were able to prepay a lot of those multi-year contracts, so you wouldn't have to carry that cost for multiple years. So the asset is larger than the liability. So that was the biggest change that happened this year. We did have the decrease in your fund balance. If you jump over to page 14, you can see on a fund level. Your general fund still is pretty strong at 11.5 million, which was that June. That includes all of those adjustments and changes that needed to be made. So 11.5 is where you sit. In context, if you look up at your liabilities, you have 11.7. So that covers approximately 2 months worth of wages and other payable items. So that's about 2 months worth of activity that's sitting in your fund balance.
This is as of June 30th.
June 30th, yes. So that probably has changed, but I like to look at in context of the expenditures, because I think it's very easy to see, you know, triple digits and thinking, oh, this district is just loaded with money. But in reality, that gets you about 2 months down the road. And so keeping that in context and keeping that in context for your patrons is pretty important to me.
So. You said that the 11,499 gets you 2 months down the road. Is that what you're saying?
Rough estimate.
Right. But will there not be other funds that come in?
Yes.
Oh,
of course. Of course. Yeah, you're not stagnant, but this is just saying
It's kind of like one of those doomsday things, like if everything
Right.
stopped, how long could we survive?
Right, but if everything's stay constant,
then you're fine. Yeah.
then we have an $11 million surplus
You have $11 million to use for future plans.
for future.
Future plans.
So
Whatever costs if you want.
So what is healthy for most districts to carry? There's a percentage, I know that.
Yeah, the GFOA, the GFOA has come out with some guidance recently. It actually is very dependent on your organization and what you see coming down the future. You know, we have water districts that are going to have to replace pumps at $600,000, so they need a pretty large fund balance considering their average expenditures, because 10 years down the road they're going to need it. For you guys, you have school expansions you have to take into consideration, school maintenance, you know, that's not covered by your capital projects funds because costs are just insanity right now. So they're not going to be able to cover everything. So it's really hard to say, you know, at 3% you'd be great, or at 7% you'd be great. I think it's just a matter of watching that fund balance and seeing on average, you know, what are we spending throughout the year versus what is our known funding, what is our secure funding, and basing it on that. So I apologize, I don't have a better
Oh, no,
answer.
that's okay. But Jeremy, we will rely on that if funding goes down for average daily attendance. Those are the funds that if we don't, that if we need to make up a difference, we're gonna be good.
So the question that I have is, let's say that everything stays status quo, right? And it's June 30th to.
Well, July 1st to June 30th, it's a fiscal.
Yeah.
Fiscal year, July 1st to June.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so as we roll around closer to June 30th, and that $11 million is still sitting there.
You have to
Yeah,
have,
should technically,
Yeah.
unless you're spending down for some reason.
by Idaho code, we have to have 5%, don't we? I thought that was in code.
I am not aware of that.
Okay.
Could be. I got
I guess. Let's see. $11 million, lots of good can be done for our students with $11 million.
Well, so here's
So
the-
I just want to understand that.
The struggle is that your funding comes in periodically. It's not like a store where I'm gonna sell today and I'm gonna sell tomorrow and I'm gonna sell the next day. So unfortunately, you guys have, you know, I'm gonna drop a load here and I'm gonna drop a load there. And you have to survive that interim period on whatever's been provided to you. So the 11 million is really, you need to keep enough so that you can float through those periods in between.
And what is usually, what is that float need to be usually? Does it need to be the full 11 million?
So you get, how often do your state payments come?
We get an August payment, February, May, and then we make up in July.
So about 2 to 3 months is what you need to be able to float.
And 11 million floats too.
I think the last time, Jeremy, and this was long before I was on the board, but the housing bubble burst in 2008. Like our funding, the district's funding, like I said, I don't know the numbers. Kelly,
I was here then. I don't remember the number, but I was.
but funding got cut hard. That was when everyone thought, that the tax revenue drastically decreased. They did, the legislature met, everything got cut really hard. And I don't know what the numbers, because I agree with you, a lot of good. There's a lot of needs today that are being put off or postponed or not even happening because there's no funding for it. If we could use 11 million, let's do it. But at the same time, if the uncertainty where we are today in the world, who knows what's going to happen to funding?
Yeah,
2 months.
2 months doesn't seem like a lot to me. I just didn't have that context in my head. Now that I do. So it's just for 2 months.
Something the legislature meets in January. So we're halfway through the school year when they meet, and like in 2008, when housing bubble burst, it was 2009, they came through and said, oh, you know what, we're spending way too much money on schools, cut it all halfway through the school year, that's why we have to be able, because we've made commitments to people. And
Well, even COVID, didn't they cut budgets half right in this middle? of
yeah, so that's the other thing, they meet.
5%, I think, and they did that right.
Thank you for clarifying. I just didn't understand.
So on the good news,
First of all,
yes. If you look at the debt service fund, you have 6 million in your debt service fund, and the amount of debt that you had left at the end of the year was 4.9. So you had an overage in that debt service fund. You did pay off all of that debt, and so that overage is actually probably, I'm not making your decisions for you, but that debt service should flow into that capital projects and give you a little more maintenance money to be able to facilitate some of your big projects and things like that. So that's kind of good news, is that even though we kind of had a little bit of extra in that debt service fund that we didn't need, it's able to go into used on your buildings and to help facilitate some of those repairs.
So that would be transferred from the debt service funds into the general
Capital projects.
capital projects.
So that's the money that we're talking about the bond.
Yeah.
redemption.
Can
that's
we,
that.
can we,
Yep.
yeah,
But yes, that's where it
let's
goes.
just make sure we follow policy.
Yeah.
So lots of good things. The district really did, you've done a lot to pay that debt down faster than you needed to, which is great because it's put you in a strong position. Idaho Falls was historically, you had 30 years with no debt, and then you finally had to build some new buildings and got into quite a lot of debt. And now you're back out. So it's pretty impressive to see how fast and how far you came with that. And a lot of sacrifices were made from the general fund, 5 million for land purchases 1 year, so that you wouldn't have to take that in bond. So you wouldn't have to take that in property tax. I mean, the district has worked hard many times to make sacrifices so that the patrons would be able to have that relief in as much as possible. I commend the district for all of those efforts, and also encourage you to continue that forward thinking and the forward planning so that you're looking 5 years, 8 years down the road, and not just what's going to happen next year. Because that's really where you're going to be able to float some of those tides, housing market crashes, COVIDs, those kinds of things is when we're looking down the road and we've got that preparation done. There wasn't a whole lot more. I think we've hit the hard points and the high points, and Linnell and Jess have taken a look at it, and so work with them to finalize and get everything done. That should be happening in the next week or so.
One
We
more,
just have-
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
Question. Please forgive me, I'm irritated and so sorry.
Forgive the orange shirt.
I understand. The $11 million carries, can carry year to year.
Mhm.
Is there a limit on the amount that can be carried?
In your general fund, no, but I think your patrons will help you set that limit if you get too big.
That's one of the things, Jeremy, that we heard the most about when we go into bond is the district sitting on all of this cash, millions of dollars. Why don't they use it to build, a school and so forth? It's patrons are, well, I should say all patrons,
Some.
some
They're definitely.
are definitely aware of it. Follow that number very, very close.
You
Which
might
is one of the-
remember, I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
It's one of the reasons that I've tried to put it in context in the last few years, because I think there's just a misunderstanding about how much it takes to run a district, about how much money it really takes to keep your teachers, involved in the classes and to keep the classes running.
Yeah, I mean, $11 million, 2 months. That's context. Everybody understands that $11 million is really not that much money.
You say it by itself, it's a ton of money. You
Yeah.
say it's 2 months of operating expenses and then you're out of business. But from a business perspective.
Yeah.
It's not very much.
It's not, it's not.
We can't get lines of credit. Just,
Yeah.
like the verbal.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working in the district. You have good people in place and they're doing their best and they're doing a good job, so. Next year's gonna be even better. It's gonna be
Thank you for
awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Hey, do we want to move on to elementary layouts? We have several people here.
I believe Jess has in front of you the different school options and students here from our design labs. And I wanted to share with you the results of, or the feedback that we received. We had this summer, we had a group of people come in and give us that have been in the 4 schools that we have, Longfellow, Epiboy, Stora, and Edgemont. What they liked about the design, things that they maybe would want to see that might be different in the design, and strengths of the designs, and then we went and visited the schools. Now, Hillary and Elizabeth, I did not get feedback from you as part of that group because you're going to be able to give yours tonight. But I want to provide for you the questions that we posed to everyone. We went on the school visits, kind of walked you through it. We did ask for recommendations on would you go 1-story or 2-story? If you went 1-story, which plan would you choose? And what things are most important to you in the building? So the students here to ask the more specific questions. So I'll just walk you through, and this is all of the feedback that I received. I did not leave any of it out. Stephen, do you want one of these just so you can
Sure.
see it? There you go. So what do you like about the 2-story design? I think you'll see that overall people like the space.
Just a question on that. Like, are they, when they say they like the space, are they comparing it to a 1-story design? Or are they comparing, what is that like when it says,
We do a comparison, but this one is just, what did you like about the 2-story
there's a
design?
face in this 2-story
And then it
design?
goes on to say more space for storage.
Yeah, storage, the classroom.
Like, do our other schools not have space?
No,
Does
we
it
only
just-
surveyed people, these are people who have
Just is
worked
that-
in those schools.
The square footage is the same, correct?
Yes.
I can report on that because it's actually different.
Oh,
That might be the same thing.
Yeah.
so, do you want to answer that before we go through this? Or- Okay. Then the second one is, what would you change about the 2-story design? Security comes up a lot here, even though we've added security access. There was a lot about outlets, the way the microwave worked in the faculty room got discussed a lot. And you can see a lot more secure, a smaller stage. Do we need a stage?
Where's this?
This is question number 2.
I don't see.
So the last bullet point on number 1, the last bullet point on number 1, they talk about security.
Yeah, number 10 on number 1 says more secure buildings. Roof drainage was talked about off and on by different schools.
Lost.
Number two.
You said
Well, just the security was in this one. It's in.
Oh, I moved on to number two, sorry.
Oh, number 10 in the first bullet.
Yeah.
So I actually thought those two-story buildings were fairly secure. You have the double pane, you can't get in.
One thing we
I
found
thought they were
in
secure.
the tour is not that, not the front entrance, but like the stairways that are the extra stairways at the back can be security issues for the students inside the school.
I mean, like,
Like they might try and go hide in the stairwell. Like the children might try to go get in trouble in the,
they're not.
Some schools-
Secure.
Right, and then have the doors.
And they have the glass at the front of the gym, so some schools have put up like film so that you can't see through. So these are the,
Okay.
and these are the perceptions of the people who work in those buildings that were part of this group. And you'll see things like cupboards and
And just to clarify, most of this feedback I heard at the beginning is regarding the current four schools.
Yes.
We've taken that under consideration for adjustments to that floor plan, should that be repeated for these.
so number three, what did you like about one story in general design? So you'll see layout, a lot of the light, the openness, the interior design, things like that. And you'll see like on the first bullet, number two, heat pumps. So obviously this person was either custodial or maintenance type person. Then if you'll turn to the back of the first page, then what things in the schools that we toured in Utah do you think would need to be changed? So, and these are just based on visit. And we do have some video that we'll share with you here in just a minute. Talked about maybe the kindergarten area is a little bit smaller. Controlled access, Stephen, that was one of the points on number 4, the last bullet point. And my understanding is you have that in your new designs. Is that correct?
We do. We have secure vestibules on the interior. And all the access points are locked in under school hours.
Okay.
Access control through.
So number 5, and all this is one of those famous things that makes it look like more numbers, but number 5, if you were going to choose 1-story or 2-story, 2 people chose 2-story, 8 people selected 1-story. And then if you look at number 6, which school would you recommend? The first school that you visited or the second? Everyone selected the second. You'll see it here.
They're just
back
different, a
up.
little bit different layouts on the one story.
You'll see a video.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are both story.
Yeah.
So now there is a caveat to this. If you, on number 7, why did you select, the first or the second school? The third bullet down says, sorry, I actually like the first design. They couldn't go back in the survey. I created it on Qualtrics, so there just wasn't an option to go back. So 1 person would have chosen the first school, 7 would have chosen the second school. So, and you'll see different things. The 1-story design has better traffic flow. You can see all the way through the school. So from a safety perspective, you have more line of sight in the 1-story than in the 2-story. And that was something people did really like. Then on the last page, regardless of what we pick, what do you think is most important? So again, you're going to see different roles, but like storage, safety, and storage is again on the second bullet. Wasted space, we want to avoid large classrooms, open, welcoming, breakout spaces for small groups, safety. So we see safety on here 3 or 4 times. And class size, I think, are important. And here we have teachers, we have parents, directors, custodial, and Margaret was part of the group as well. Any other comments that you'd like to add? Mostly it was just like appreciated the opportunity to go, and the different designs and the lighting. So both of these schools were in Utah. Tito has put together 2 short videos. They're about 1 minute and 40 seconds of each school video. It will just give you a very small flavor. This is when my mom was in the hospital, so he made a 27-minute video for me. And it's really good, but this will be
It's
the
like
Yeah, I'd be happy to share it with you if you'd like.
I have one quick question. I think a word was cut off on the second page.
Oh, let me look, I can pull up the survey and give
It
it.
says the two story design.
Oh. Yes, I'll pull that while you watch the video.
At the top of the next page, Elizabeth, safety.
Oh, thank you.
So I noticed some classrooms were tiled and some were carpeted. What distinguishes between the classroom that's tiled versus one that's carpeted?
Most of the carpeting is for tactile surface, which is what you have in your current schools. Just depends on, for instance, if it's a wall that has a marker on it, mostly it's going to be for marker writing, and all the rest of the walls will be carpeted.
I don't think the walls in it.
The flooring.
All flooring.
Yeah.
So if it's around a sink or wet area, they'll have tile, and then it'll transition to carpet. There's carpet everywhere,
It's just
except for
Oh, one.
one room.
And
Our second school.
So can you just start it and pause it? Yes, I just have a question on the outside. It's on the What's on the second story of this? Is it just open?
That's just.
So the windows are above the
Yep,
gym
okay.
instead of kind of below
That
level.
was the entrance.
Is the gym.
The entrance is right there on the right.
This one matches the vernacular of Lewiston, Utah, so it could be changed. As I say, in the architecture industry, it's just lipstick on paper.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So I think the discussion tonight, I believe, is about 1-story versus 2-story building. So what we can do.
So can you start with addressing Jeremy's question?
Yes. So, Right now, your current Boyce, Erickson, Edgemont, and Longfellow schools sit at 68,348 square feet. Birch Creek plan is 66,601, so that's a delta of 2,000. So that's just 1,748 schools. 1,748 square.
66,000.
66,601 for Birch Creek. That's the first school.
So where's that delta made up? What does the one school have that the other doesn't?
What the 1-story school doesn't have, that the 2-story school doesn't have an elevator. That alone is 130 square feet. If you equate that to roughly $350 a square foot, that's about $45,000 savings just in square footage, not including $100,000 for the elevator. So there's some cost savings there. There's opportunity costs as well for teachers and faculty who don't cart things up in the elevator as well.
Stair access is.
Yeah, and district savings for having to maintain those. Lewiston is the smallest footprint square footage, and that's at 64,001.
Is that the first?
That's the second school.
And everybody preferred.
One everyone preferred.
But did I say the caveat on that though is that's depending on how many classrooms you put on each wing.
It does.
So I think like if, I don't know if we're comparing apples to apples to say that those were 4-bys. So maybe it's.
You could add another 2 classes.
If you equate that to like the maximum square footage for a class before you have to add another 980 square feet, that's 4 more regular classrooms, just based on that. Or 2 regular classrooms and another kindergarten classroom, which is what you need.
We know we have to put the
We
kindergarten.
know you have to do that. Yeah.
Which one is? Ours.
900. And 3 extra classrooms gives you 3,000 square feet. You're right in the ball.
Yeah, because your classroom for your kindergarten is about 1,200.
We haven't seen it.
Oh, yeah. So
And were these schools 3 per grade level, 4 per grade level? Do you know?
I think there were 3 section.
Did you notice them? If they were 3-bys or 4-bys?
I thought one of them was 4. Yeah, I was thinking of, okay, yeah, first one is circular, the second is
Just extended to
Can I just ask a looking into the future question? Is 3 additional classrooms enough? We have the land, we have the space. Are we shortchanging ourselves by not adding a couple extra classrooms?
The design of the schools is such that the classroom addition is easy to do without making it look like it's an addition. So if you can save the money up front and add it later, and do the same thing. We've done these with schools in Cache County recently, high schools, we're planning on doing middle school, we're currently designing. So we're planning for that addition. We plan for that as well.
So you just see any walls and then you just carry it to.
Well, we're doing ICF construction for this school. And it would just be extension, but it does have a CMU veneer. We haven't decided on the exterior finishes, but they can be adapted to it. They look like it was always meant to be that way.
With adding additional classrooms later, we have to find the money for that.
It is true. It is true. And there's the escalation of construction costs from now to the time you build them. That's always the case if you decide to.
What did you say cost per square foot? Yes.
And I just said 350. I threw that out there, but it could be up to 400. So if you want to be conservative, I put
So that's an extra, 3 classrooms is an extra 1.1. Right, but does it fit with inside of it?
But couldn't we supplement? So, just talking about the general fund, right? I mean, or some of that savings from the bond that we just paid off, that 3 million that we have there, and it's something to consider. Adding-
There's still power for portable classrooms and to get you through that expansion before you get to build onto the school if needed. I know that I don't like them either, but
If we have,
It'll be spent
we have-
before we,
we have the funds,
it's easier to do it now.
add 3 extra classrooms, and that gives you an expansion of like how many subdivisions, right? Like that's 2 subdivisions based upon our calculations of students per household.
And I'm just gonna give you kind of another view of that same thing. And this doesn't mean I'm stating an opinion. I'm just giving you some more to consider. We can do that. That will reduce the maintenance that we're able to do by $1.2 million or whatever. For next summer or the summer after, whatever. And, maintenance has been an issue, so those are gonna be the things that we kind of have to grapple with and decide. And again, I'm not opposed, I'm just saying we have the whole.
How do you get to that number, 1.2 million?
I thought that's what
That's what
they're
we're just saying, like.
Oh, for the cost, oh, I thought you meant.
The cost of the
for 2
additional-
million Savings.
No.
There's-
for the cost of the additional
For the additional
classrooms. So then, and
And if
we
you
could
use-
pay for that.
And if you use that $3 million, if you use 1.1 million and 3 million, then you're looking at 1.9 left to do important maintenance stuff.
Well, we've already used that money for architect and we'll use it for.
But that'll be reimbursed. That'll be.
If we
Yes.
prevail in court.
Hopefully,
It will be.
hopefully, that's it. will be.
Yes.
But then that comes back, right?
Mhm.
I think we should really think hard about. We're in the process of just making sure we have a little. Especially.
Small south.
Yeah, south of town, and especially if we're looking at the overflow. I mean, Edmont's still overflow, Sunnyside still overflow.
I would love to end overflow, so anything you could do to help us.
I think it's,
Well, the other thing, even with the additional 4. The way
now
the
that's
school,
additional 3,
3,
1.1 is 3.
is 3. But
1.5.
the layout, to make sure the layout can accommodate, so you're not so far up against a boundary. Just, this is just looking at it from page, but you're not so far up against a boundary that you can't do it down the road either. Because I'm with you, I agree with the 3, but then we also need to be able to add 4 and 5 in 7 to 10 years maybe.
so currently with the school that we have with future expansion that we've designed, we've done them to split alternates. So that you can know the numbers when they come in, and if the numbers don't line up, it's not doing it.
We just got the. And let's hope we can get it for 350. If you got it for 350, then you're under.
CMGC,
What's that?
your CMGC will help with those numbers once they're hired. Us to.
I think, most of my opinions, nobody asked. I think that I did like the 1 story in general. I think the light, like when you come in, is nice, like you guys could see with the library, media center part. Easy to lock down those hallways, kind of the same. I think the one thing that is missing or seemed missing to me is some of in our current 2-story schools, we have a lot of space in the middle where they're able to do individual one-on-one work and those small works. There's not a lot of that. And I think that's something we need to address, because if not, then we've got tables in the hallways, we've got, which is what we're trying to avoid. And so, one of the things is they had a computer lab. We don't need computer labs, so maybe you can convert things like that in each wing into open spaces. I think there's things that can be done there, but I think we definitely need to have some of that open workspace for private
So
kid work. Yeah.
we just had one, and this is in the comments. we saw one school where they had a class in the vestibule on the backside, not the front entrance vestibule, but on the backside. They had a class meeting in the vestibule. And that didn't seem safe to me or other people on the tours, and it's in the comments that it didn't seem safe. So they're obviously missing spaces to work outside the classroom. And using the vestibule is not really the option I think we want.
Can you, just a thought, I mean, it looked like in the library, they have those single story bookshelves, whatever, four-story bookshelves. Create learning spaces inside the library, just a simple change to make that possible. Yeah.
Students' classes are connected to the library or can be, so that could also be an expansion of spaces for that. It also has some solutions for pushing in classrooms in the front side of the school to create pockets of out classroom space for library. It's to break out of space.
Well, and part of that is we need line of sight. So, you know, because they have to have the teacher line of sight for those breakout spaces, so we have to make sure we're.
Is your preference the one story after going on the score and going before?
I think so. I just think security wise and those kind of things, it's easy to see everything, you know, you're looking, it's kind of like Sunnyside, right? You know, you're looking down each of the hallways, you know, minus the new part, you can see everything. Again, the secure entrances, and the other thing, I wouldn't have thought of this, so it was great to have all the teachers and principals there, is if you look at the back of the school, like where the asphalt playground is, it's like, it's, everybody comes out for recess, like, kind of in a central area, that's a lot easier to supervise. So you've kind of got all your, you know, hard surface play area right like in that V of the school, and then you've got maybe your grass area behind it, but it's the teachers and stuff are looking at it. And whoever's on duty or whatever, they can see the kids really well, which it's something I wouldn't have even thought of. Versus at a lot of our schools, you know, we've got play areas on both sides and kids everywhere. And this way, that security part is there, right there.
And the principal of the first school actually told me she gets a lot less calls from people in the community about security because the playground is contained at the back of the school. And so nobody's like, oh, I saw somebody driving past the playground, because they can't. It's at the back of the school, contained by the wings of the school. And so she is fielding a lot of calls about security. It frees up time in the day.
And that design is similar to Linden Park where I was principal. The only thing we want to make sure we have some good security cameras back there, just where it's hidden from the view of the road. You can sometimes have to see things.
Site B is, yeah, that's not the church site. Is it the church site?
That's crazy.
The front page is church site.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
So, heaven forbid that we ever got in a situation where there was an active shooter. People trapped on the second floor. Can't go out windows, can't get out, but people on the first floor, everybody can go out. Right? So that's a huge.
Those windows open when they open.
I don't think that one of
No,
those
no.
ones were.
One of them do not have one. It's one that. So that's just a preference from the district.
Breakable windows.
All of them. They're tempered, so you can build small little pieces.
On your construction today for new schools, is most of things like the big windows that we saw in the library in one of the videos that I remember, it's the first or second one. Those all glass that bulletproof glass, or what are you using today?
They're just tempered glass.
Just only tempered.
However, in the most recent elementary school we did in Logan, we did do ballistic film on the office windows and the main entrance vestibule.
I'll just the percent drives up the cost.
I don't, but it's something to find out.
And is it? Can you help us understand their thought process on that? What drove them to do that? Safety, totally safety?
I can only speculate. It's an inner city school. It is the middle of town. We got a lot of, it's an international school. I think there's kids from like 30 different countries at that school.
In Logan.
In Logan. There's a lot of refugees that come to Logan. It's just planning for the worst, hoping for the best.
It's probably cheaper to do it when you're building
Absolutely.
than retrofit it later.
But it is something that can be contracted out. Because it is a post-install process. It's about 3 hours. Things up to mention while we're there, with the wings that go in the back, pushing classrooms out to the front to create those more spaces. That classroom wings was preferred to keep from having blind corners. So if you push those classrooms out, obviously the other corner. If you keep those straight, then that's better for security and playground.
Yeah, I just think based on where we're at, the first story probably has more advantages than the second one right now, in my thoughts.
Upstairs, you to go up to the stage platform.
Kelly and I talked about this a lot, and Kelly was the principal of Dora Erickson in the new design, and then he was also at schools that were 1-story throughout his career. And I've only been at 1-story, but for the two of us, from an administrative perspective and looking at all of those things, line of sight, being able to evacuate a building in different ways, and just the learning, really. We prefer the 1-story, right? So yeah, we'd have lots of conversations.
In one of the comments, it said that for the second-story building, there was trouble with roof drainage. How would that be any different from a 2-story to a 1-story?
It's just a matter of details.
We also talked to us when that came up in the group, remember in the summer when we had the teachers, the principal, the custodian. We talked about that. I thought you mentioned a little different kind of grouping or something afterwards when we were talking. Gosh, I can't remember the
I'm not
details.
entirely sure the nature of the drainage. Maybe it was just because they were draining out onto concrete rather than down to the subterranean drain.
I remember when we were in Utah, you talked a little bit about different grading, like a different slope for the options.
Yeah,
Like you can choose a slope or another slope.
yeah. Like a minimum sloping one on a flat roof is 1/4 and 12. We always do a half just to make sure all water's got some legs to get down to the drain. So I'm not concerned about.
Neither am I just was
There is some detail.
just curious about the question.
You know, where some 1-story elements dive into the 2-story element, some of the upper classrooms like 45 there was some details there that were pretty tricky to figure out, and that may have been where some of things were happening. I know we're gonna have some condensation problems because of some cold paths where things weren't insulated. But I think we remedied that.
Kind of with the style of building. They're not going to run into the cold pass at all.
No. Another thing is 1-story school versus the 2-story, it is expandable, like I mentioned. That 2-story school really is kind of locked in the way it's designed. Without a lot of effort to add an appendage on there. Anything that's added to it. If architecture is just in my book.
Heating costs, all that is comparable.
Yes, well, we've heard from the school district that they don't want to go with the ground source heat pump, so we would just go with the standard boiler and chiller system, which may cost a little bit more upfront, but the longevity of the systems is.
That's for the 1- and 2-story school.
They're both on geoloops, just like your schools up here. And
Those systems are roof mounted.
they are. The boiler and chiller are in the mechanical room, and then they have large area with VAV boxes, variable air volume boxes to adjust the cooling.
Easier to run your track system or your single story over section.
Well, I mean, I've always been told, I always hate asking questions with Gary in the room because you know the answer. I've always been told it's cheaper to build up. So what cost differences are we looking at between floor plan with a larger footprint versus one with a two-story with a smaller?
Well, considering a two-story, your cooling pumps work really well for the main floor. Cooling happens, as long as you keep your classroom doors closed, the cooling will also work very well upstairs as well. As soon as you open the doors, you have outflow of air to where it flows down. Your comfort's going to increase on a one-story school. That's going to be more equalized over the school as a result. But as far as like the energy conservation of one over the other, two-story school typically is more conservative as far as energy goes, just because of the footprint smaller. However, with ICF and the energy code, the way that it's written now, one-story school is pretty beneficial.
What about just the flat costs? Like you said, you mentioned 350, 400 square foot. The Lewiston design, what would the two-story building be cost per square foot?
It would be equal.
Equal or more?
Or more? It's not cheaper to build.
No, because you have to brace and structure. You have to engineer in the load sitting on top of each other.
It's also, your second floor is a structure that is steel to support the floor. Whereas a one-story stool is just the ground supports the floor that's already there for the most part. So that there's savings there.
I was like,
Well, at the time we were also,
Go down.
at the time they were also, there were schools on the property and we had to build with the space available. So that was part of the constraint and the push, I believe, towards the two-story model.
If you're looking for a school that would be able to get built while the other one's still.
So that drove a lot of that.
yeah, it'd be 4 schools. I think when I was building my house.
Mhm.
I don't know anything about 4 schools that were built.
Hey, any other questions?
So we,
I think this was just kind of to get an idea, anybody got a feel?
we can get a decision. on-
Yeah, we'll decide at the meeting. Yeah, so it just kind of get some of the preliminary info out there, so we're prepared at the meeting to.
Would suggest also, since there's already been a lot that have given feedback on the two-story school, and those that forward, if you could appoint some people to be on a steering committee for this, if you end up going with the Lewiston plan, appoint people to be on a steering committee to kind of brainstorm the design and the spaces, and let's make it work for your district. The square footage.
And we've talked a lot about 2 versus 1 story, but we haven't talked very much at all. Lewiston versus, is the other Birch Creek?
Birch Creek.
Similar, like they're not diametrically different, just I think the other one just kind of is a little more aesthetically.
The biggest difference between the two, biggest difference between the two is the classroom wing. Lewiston has a loop that runs through. It can reconnects to the hallway. And the Birch Creek plan is essentially your Erickson plan. But it has that kinder when it wraps around, kind of hugs the little outdoor play area in front of the school. Similarly,
It's all of these.
It's black.
yeah, that's where the kind of is. Just like a Erickson.
And I think that's something we want to feedback on too, because I think it's kind of a mixed bag on if they're getting used, if they're needed.
A kindergarten.
I think what I think we could measure what the teachers. staff,
Honestly,
parents
that's
think about it.
Sure, because some use them, some don't, it doesn't seem to.
And none of them have the little gyms anymore. So,
So they just.
what?
So they pull out.
They're not in these ones. Yeah, they didn't have like, we have those little kindergarten gyms, none of these. which I think is fine.
They were like, it's right?
Oh. Lewis. So the Lewiston one is the one that everybody liked.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even from these layouts, like it'll all has to be modified for at least the kindergarten area, because they only have two. And maybe three, at least three.
That was a question to ask.
Where the
I don't know, I'm a free case right now, we just have it in certain schools.
Was there by chance, did you get us an overlay of just the classroom sits in Lewiston? Yes.
Oh, it's different.
So the bulk just to compare. Somebody for each.
So there's two that you go on the screen.
Yeah, have a good show.
You're gonna take a break. Okay. It sounds good after we're done with this. Yes, sounds good. Sounds good. I'm sorry, it gets.
Yeah, I'm not sure which is which. I think that first.
Sorry.
Try the other one.
I know.
We're all too old. Yeah, I was gonna say maybe
Study
if
'em.
you could just email them to us, yeah, and then we can look at them. And whatever. Other
I'll send it to Jess.
Perfect.
Just send it in.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
But that there's the most.
And that's the one that will be easily to add on.
Correct. And the reason why one lane is shorter than the other, that was for both schools, is because of site constraints. It was a rectangular site, so it should.
Like, up here's the kindergarten rooms, right? And so there'd be like another room here too.
We had talked about maybe moving that workroom and this wing over here. And so that you'd have another mid hallway access to the playground. We thought that would, for safety and just for traffic flow. That's what Kelly and I do. Look at the brains.
Those always were, the one where they lengthened the one and shortened the other, that was a really long.
Yeah.
hallway.
But ours could be different.
Almost, if we move some of those classrooms out to the front, it'll make them feel not as long.
Okay.
It breaks up how long
Right.
the walls are.
Yes.
There's a little trick, sweet trick.
No horse racetrack.
Oh, did it?
They could ride the other horses.
Yeah.
Watch the horses.
Hey,
I got number one.
We're gonna teach side business.
okay, so we're good for now. Any other questions? I'd say feel free to reach out, for the meeting and get it resolved. So, okay, let's take a 15-minute break.
And we have dinner is here, so grab your food.
Thank you so much.
For driving all this way.
Come on, you talk. Yeah.
Appreciate it.